And so we're off on to flexibility. Flexibility is the in word now, not demand-side response, and I'm sure most of them will use the right word when we're talking about it, because it is important that people are able to use their flexibility these days to help balance the system. So we're kicking off with David Hill, and David will introduce himself and his topic. Thanks, David.
Thank you very much. Right. I don't think there's any mics, so I hope you can all hear me. I'll try and speak up. I'm David Hill, Commercial Director of Open Energy, and for those of you who don't know Open Energy, we are one of the leading advanced providers of distributed energy management software in the UK. Now, I think it would be disingenuous of me at this point, after everything you've heard, and for many of you in the room who have sort of got involved in demand response or demand-side flexibility or behind-the-meter battery storage or however you want to talk about it, I think if any of you have looked at it, you'll understand that probably right now is one of the hardest times to be making decisions right now, and I think it would be disingenuous of me to sort of avoid that as a topic. Like, I got involved in this industry a number of years ago, principally because I'm pretty much a climate change activist that used the corporate world to sort of get my sort of ideas out there, because I saw a presentation a very long time ago that proved how powerful demand-side flexibility can be in terms of integrating renewable energy at the lowest cost possible and enabling businesses to carry on being productive in a fully renewable world. And I still believe that to this day, which is why I do think we still have to sort of take our head above the individual types of ways in which we can make money and really do think long-term, because if you don't think long-term, it is not going to be like the easiest way to start investing in these technologies. Now, I would probably be the worst commercial director in the world if I stopped making you invest in these technologies, because I do believe these things and these trends are at play, and the value of flexibility is an enduring one. It's just going through a bit of a time whereby the market's not fully aligned in a way that we can actually extract the true value. But if we actually go to these big themes like decarbonisation is happening. I think one of the things I continue to return to is the fact that Ørsted got that offshore wind contract for, I can't remember what it was, about £57 per megawatt hour. That's an astoundingly cheap ability to generate renewable energy at incredibly low-cost prices. What that basically means is, when there's wind in the North Sea, we all want to be using as much energy as possible. When there's not wind in the North Sea, we want to figure out how to sort of get energy from other places. So that's happening, and that's not going away, and there's more of that being built. Digitization, obviously. Our ability to measure and monitor everything we can do now is getting cheaper and cheaper. So our ability to actually extract and unlock value from smaller sources of flexibility is only going to get cheaper as we begin to be able to connect with much more different devices and understand how our businesses are working in real time. Distribution. It is obvious that I think over a quarter of the UK's generation is now coming from distributed assets. So that, again, is not going to be a trend that begins to stop. We are increasingly generating more from generation assets on sites, whether they are renewable biogas plants, or whether they're rooftop solar, or whether they are sort of, we do corporate PPAs. We are continually doing that in more in increasing levels. And democratization, so your ability to actually become a prosumer in the market. How can we begin to not just sit at the end of the value chain? How can consumers actually begin to participate more in the energy system to continue to reduce their bills? Now, if you take all of those four things, they are all four things that are happening. Yes, the FFR market price, the price in FFR is very cheap. Yes, the TCR has caused huge amounts of uncertainty. But these four things are happening, and they will only further the value of flexibility and only further the value of businesses effectively connecting up their existing systems, looking at other systems, and how these assets can integrate with the energy system. This is just a bit of an infographic that effectively shows how we tend to work with our customers. I think this one here, because I've only got 10 minutes, is a bit more interesting. So one of the things that was spoken about earlier is, I think, is incredibly important, which is the way we create value here, and most of you will know it, is about stacking. The only way we can create value from connecting, say, a large pumping system, or connecting a bitumen tank, or connecting a battery asset, or a CHP, the only way we can create value in the energy markets is by trying to do as many different things at the same time. And that requires not just the market to be organized in a way that you can do that, so we can try and bid for many different things. So if I can turn my demand down at any given time, can I offer that to National Grid, the distribution network, and my energy supplier all at the same time and stack those revenues? Increasingly, we're getting to the point in which we can do that, and technologically, we can already do that. From what I call advanced portfolio optimization, I think increasingly what we need to be able, that's on the next one. Increasingly, other than stacking, we need to be able to try and integrate with as many different processes as possible. So single-purpose assets tend not to be very good. So just having a battery just doing FFR, or having a CHP just doing store, these things don't tend to be make very good business sense. Having an asset that is doing many different things at the same time. So for instance, one of the things I begin to do a lot with our clients is really think about some of the demand-side flexibility, not just in the benefits we can create, but also in the resilience that it creates in your business. Your ability your business to react instantaneously to issues on the energy system not only creates value, it makes your systems more resilient and enduring in the long term. Now, how can we begin to attach values to that business resilience? Because there are values, and we're just not capturing those values in the business case. Also, I mean, there is still huge carbon benefits from being able to actually shift your demand around in real time. If any of your companies have science-based targets on reducing your carbon emissions, I am aware that most people report carbon by just looking at a total kilowatt-hour consumption and timesing it by carbon intensity. We don't actually have to do that. We can know in real time what the carbon intensity of the power on the grid is at any given time, and actually as we shift it around, because if we're shifting it around to the cheapest times, we're actually reducing your carbon by doing that, and we'll be able to report lower carbon figures just by using demand-side flexibility. Now, we're going to have to just get more creative in the ways in which we build the business cases for doing this, because if we believe in the first slide that there's going to be enduring value, Warren Buffett says invest when the market's low. So, this is the time to be making the decisions to be able to reap the value in the future. Here's Open Energy's view, I guess, of future values of all the different types of schemes we see out there. And I guess, we are being entirely transparent here. We see most of the values are going down at the moment. So I think FFR is the yellow line there. So this is effectively taking a 1C battery system. What that means is effectively a battery that has 1 hour of storage capability, and this enables us to compare apples for apples of all the different types of market mechanisms of how we can create value from demand-side flexibility. So the big one you'll see there, the cliff edge, which is the triad, that is, still the uncertainty that surrounds that, which is, I would say, arguably that more than the capacity market and FFR has probably created the biggest breaks on the system in the whole market. But you'll see there are two lines that are increasing in there, which are effectively the imbalance market and the day-ahead market. And we're incredibly conservative about our value of effectively being able to manage demand in terms of the arbitrage of being able to shift your pattern to the cheapest times of day and enable your energy supplier to help you create value out of that. And increasingly, energy suppliers are beginning to create really cool products in this area that can work with technology platforms like us. Ørsted, who I might be speaking later, have probably been some of the first movers in this market with their Price Pilot and their RBR products, in which we've worked with them a lot on a number of different processes where we can actually substitute out the loss of revenues from FFR with new exciting ways of accessing the wholesale market. And one of the reasons I'm really excited about this is it's not just another scheme which by tons of things go into it and the price just drops, because one of the issues of a lot of National Grid markets, and I'm not bashing National Grid with National Grid on the podium, is the fact is, they are only responsible for a small amount of flexibility requirements on the system, and most National Grid markets are pretty shallow in the context of the flexibility problem and across the entire system. So therefore, whenever there is value there, it gets arbitraged out pretty quickly because they're not huge markets. So, I can't remember how much frequency response is procured at any given time, but it's, in the region of 500 megawatts to a gigawatt. I can't exactly remember. But the problem in energy markets is so much deeper. The issue is going to be when basically there is 30 gigawatts of wind on the system and there's not 30 gigawatts of system. And that requires a much bigger problem to solve. And that's going to have hugely enduring value in terms of the ability to get technologies on board, because 30 gigawatts of flexible demand is a lot, and we've only just begun to start this journey. So I think I can see that as an increasingly interesting journey about how technology platforms like us link up with existing incumbent suppliers to be able to extract value here. The way the system we have works is we effectively try and optimize over 3 phases. So we tend to look at every single one of our assets, and we sort of see the whole thing as around dispatch, optimization, and market access. So at any given asset, we're always interested in what physical constraints this thing has. So if we're connected to a water pump, what's the pipeline pressure that it's operating towards? If we're looking to wastewater processes, what dissolved oxygen level can they operate in? If we're looking at metals, sort of melting pots that we work with, what are the temperature parameters? If we're working with battery storage, what's the warranty in terms of how much throughput we can put on it, and every single asset, we're taking in a bunch of physical constraints, and that gives us an availability sort of profile that we then tend to look at through different time formats. So we look at the day ahead, we say what's the cheapest time of power to be used if the customer has exposure to wholesale markets, and we effectively create a brand new production schedule for them, which we can automatically put into play. Then within day, we can then move that around if the imbalance price looks like it's going to make more money than the day ahead optimization, and then in real time, we layer on FFR benefits. And those 3 stages of optimization enables us to actually generate enough value to still be making investment decisions at this climate where, quite frankly, the value has gone down, and we are at a sort of more uncertain times than we've been before. And because all of our processes are fully automated, if you come into our offices, quite often some of our customers say, where's your big kind of sort of trading screen? We don't have one. It's all in the Microsoft Azure, like a cloud center. Everything we do is fully automated, from the decisions we make through to the dispatch of our assets. So we do have a console so you can begin to see why we're doing things. This here is a behind-the-meter battery storage project we've got operating at the moment, which is actually a pretty cool project because it is automatically trading power with no sort of physical human involved. Effectively, we're taking price forecasts, we then put that through our optimizer. This is actually at Arsenal Football Stadium, this individual battery. The price forecast, we then basically look at their demand forecast and we predict when they need to charge or when they need to discharge. And then the aggregated amount of demand on the site and the charging discharging, we then send back to the supplier in question, which is Ørsted in this regard, and then they buy that shape. And then within day, we then layer on RBR. So if you see the dark blue is effectively what we've told it to do the day ahead. So that's saying charge and discharge, and that's how we're creating value in the arbitrage because it's cheaper to charge at certain times and discharge. Where it's a little lighter purple, that's effectively where we've extended the discharge because the imbalance price has been high enough to actually say, you know what, deviate from your strategy originally because you're going to be able to make more money in doing so. So all of this is information is visible for you guys to make sure you understand why we're making decisions because, as I said, it's all fully automated in terms of why things are doing what they're doing. And just to give you a sense of, the case studies of how we're putting into play all of these stacking capabilities. So as I said, we are currently optimizing a 2 megawatt, 2.5 megawatt hour battery system, an Arsenal Football Club. This is, I think, is probably one of the most advanced behind-the-meter projects out there. We are fully automating day ahead, imbalance, FFR, triad, all at the same time, all to be able to sort of reduce the cost of energy on this site. We are also putting into play very similar practices with aggregate industries, whereby we are currently optimizing 10 of their bitumen tank sites, effectively, heating up tar and rocks for the tarmac on the road. But again, this is a fully automated solution where we are layering in FFR, triad avoidance, and also RBR. So again, looking to substitute out revenues that you could have been making when FFR prices were high with when there are high system imbalance prices. And this trial has been running for the best part of, I guess, maybe 6 months or so. And, we have not had any sort of event in terms of where the site has been having issues with the fact that we are fully automating all of this control philosophy. And lastly, we've also put in, well, not last, we've got 2 more, sorry. We've also put into place exactly the same process of being able to layer, again, all these different services with power trading benefits on one of United Utilities sites. So we've got a site with large wastewater processes and a CHP, all autonomously responding to system imbalance prices to create extra value. And the last one where we're getting quite excited about is we are making quite big leaps into how we can begin to put this into practice in the world of electric vehicles. So we are one of the leading providers of V2G services. We've got a project of 125 Nissan Leafs where we're going to be taking driver preferences, so all the physical constraints, like I need my car to be charged for then, I need to be doing this, and we've got a bunch of machine learning algorithms to make sure we understand exactly their usage patterns on a daily basis, and then we're choosing the charge-discharge cycle to massively reduce the cost of ownership of electric vehicles. Quite frankly, electric vehicles don't happen without flexibility software because the cost of ownership will be so high. Anyway, hope this is enough to give some food for thought for discussions.
Great. The next part of this session is I will ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll open it to the floor for questions. So,
to your right. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Stuart Duncan. I'm the Flexibility Solutions Sales Manager within Ørsted. So I'm responsible overall for our value proposition in the whole flexibility space within the UK. I think from my perspective, probably the most important point to make today is to actually echo something that David brought up around some of the kind of challenges and opportunities that we are seeing within the flexibility space within the UK as it stands currently. There are value streams that are coming under pressure in terms of value erosion, but conversely there's new opportunities to create value in the marketplace through innovations and new approaches within that space. So I think, the advice that I have to anybody in the market is education is absolutely key. It's important that you have a full view of that end-to-end value stack. And one of the things that we talk about in detail with our customers is the concept of flexibility. So I think value stacking is something that everyone should be aware of. But within that value stack, it's ensuring that you have the right contractual structures within any of the services that you participate within to be able to actually shift these in reaction to any unintended market signals that may arise at any point in time. So it's about mitigating the risks and ensuring that you've got those right structures in place to do that. And that's everything from selection of services that you participate in terms of grid services. They'll be more fixed and slightly more rigid than some of the more innovative optimization services that David spoke about that we're collaborating with Open Energy on. But also in terms of your commodity contract and ensuring that can operate actually in tandem with these demand-side flexibility services so that you can capture that whole value stack and actually optimise the revenue from it. The whole reason that we developed RBR within the UK and under the structure that we have was to really de-risk that whole process. And I can talk in some more detail about that either here or individually. But essentially, we've taken the obligation and the penalty approach that's traditionally been seen within the grid services space and removed that. So it gives people more autonomy to actually understand where that should fit within the value stack and actually an opportunity to move that depending on market conditions.
Thanks, Stuart. Adam.
Right. Thank you. My name's Adam Sims. I'm the Power Responsive Manager for National Grid ESO. This is my first MEUC event, but the Power Responsive campaign has worked closely with the MEUC over the past sort of 3.5, 4 years to really get out and engage with DSR providers and flexibility providers. So it's exciting not just for me to come out and meet you and hear concerns and suggestions sort of firsthand, but also because we're on the cusp of rolling out the new independent electricity system operator model. And there's certainly a real feeling of excitement within the ESO that we can look at innovative new solutions and really we can start to make a name for ourselves separate from the existing National Grid business. So flexibility really is key to operating the system and this is an exciting time, albeit a very uncertain one.
Thanks, Adam.
I'm Eric Bakken, Strategic Energy Solutions Manager at NLX. Don't let the accent confuse you. I'm based here in London, working through the UK market. But basically what I do is go out and work with our commercial industrial customers, help them understand all the opportunities that are out there with the markets, everything that's changing with them, understand the assets that are in place on site, and then really digging into the opportunities that are available, whether that be adding on more assets and making it more of a kind of a digitized response, or making it as kind of hands-off approach from our side of it and letting you control that aspect yourself. But really it is kind of getting out there, understanding what it is your flexibility opportunity is, and then seeing how that fits into the markets, how that fits into your kind of risk appetite, and then moving forward from there.
Thank you. Now it's over to yourselves. Who would like to ask the first question? Thanks. Sorry, identify yourself.
Oh, maybe not from Big T.
Thanks, David.
Sorry, I guess this is for Adam, but the rest of you can chip in as well. So at BT, we invested multi-millions of pounds in a demand-side response capability about 5 years ago. We didn't recover it all, got burnt quite badly by Store. I probably came to one of these events 18 months ago, and someone presented me a graph which showed the capacity mechanism as one of the surest, or capacity market, one of the surest revenue streams that I could win. And at the time I looked at it and thought, it still doesn't look appealing to me. 18 months later, it looks like an absolute car crash. Why would I be interested in looking at this, and on what timescales do you think I should be re-looking at it to get more certainty?
Yeah, it's certainly feedback that we've had before, about the stability of our markets, and notwithstanding that some of the markets, such as FFR, maybe the requirement isn't always there to drive a stable price. I think one of the key things for us is that we need to step away from setting the market price and deciding, who's going to be successful, who's not going to be successful in various tenders, and we need to make sure that contracting opportunity, that procurement opportunity, is more regular. Because really, store, when it's 3 times a year, it's a race to the bottom, isn't it? So if we can move procurement closer to real time, which is something that we're trialling with the FFR auction this summer, and we'll be looking to roll that out to store in due course as part of our reserve reform, I think that's really going to be helpful in terms of driving a stable price signal. We also want to look at long-term contracting opportunities, but I think the interaction between a short-term, regular competitive procurement and periodic long-term markets is yet to be figured out. So,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was going to add to that, which is, and there's a number of things, which is some which is like not going to be helpful and some which I hope will be helpful, which is one, it's hard to stress how much we're at the beginning of the journey here of like how, even though lots of people have been doing it for a long time like yourself, like this is the journey of sort of decentralized energy and sort of demand-side flexibility's participation like fluidly in the entirety across the energy market is really in its infancy. We are still sort of getting going. And why, and the issue is that most reserve type markets, if you look at a power station, because all we're trying to do is mimic what a power station does in a distributed way. And if you actually look at what a power station does, most of its money comes from the wholesale market. And it has sort of cherry on top. It sort of then, in the way it optimizes its asset, it looks to do ancillary services as a sort of potentially a hedging strategy to say, oh, maybe I'll just fix in some revenues here and fix in some other revenues there. No, most big power stations aren't single purpose assets that are just participating in ancillary services. So with the benefit of hindsight, it was kind of crazy that all of us were trying to make business cases just on individual markets because they were always going to be quite risky to basically live and die by one market base. So all I would ever say is that get deep into the economics, that the opening up of wholesale markets and imbalance markets is probably the most important thing to the future of demand side response, because they will have much more enduring value because the markets are so much deeper. Capacity markets and national grid-led markets are always, I was going to say, potentially be more volatile just because they're much shallower and also, dare I say it, a lot more risky to political regulation. Whereas there is currently no regulatory sort of pressure to change the design of the wholesale market. There's none. That's going to carry on going as it is. So that's where, and we, as I said, work with Ørsted, and I'd encourage all of you to talk to your power supplier to say, how are you going to help me sort of create value with the flexibility I have?
And I think that's the key part, is the flexibility that you have, understanding how that plays into the certain markets. And right now, capacity market might not look as attractive, and FFR prices are going down. Balancing mechanism is opening up for a lot of opportunities. So throughout the years, the opportunity will shift from one mechanism to another. The targeted charging review is kind of taking away one of those things that everyone's chased after, is avoiding those triads. It's not to say that won't be replaced by something else that we will all try to figure out how to avoid that non-commodity charge. But it's a fluidity within your flexibility. But it all begins with kind of understanding what you can do and how that factors into the different programs.
And I guess just real quickly, it's not a wasted investment if you've got a significant amount of bunch of sort of diesel, I don't know what it was, like in terms of demand response. If you've got a bunch of a capacity that is rigged up to a system whereby you have a central view of it all and you understand how to manage that, that optionality has value. We just haven't sort of connected it to the right thing yet. That's not a wasted investment at this point. I appreciate it might have delayed a payback, which is not great, but it's not just sitting there. It's not a mini disc that's never going to be used again. It's like,
Stuart.
Yeah, I think just following David's point, what we do see is, from an Ørsted perspective, where we're creating value and opportunity and revenue for our customers is within that imbalance market. We're seeing real volatility within system imbalance price. If you work with your supplier who have access to a good solid trading desk and have the ability to capture that opportunity, it comes back to the point of spreading or mitigating your risks across that value stack. The more things that you can get involved in, and the more services that you can participate in, then it allows you to spread that risk. But you need to do that in a flexible way. You know, the more structured and rigid that you are in that process, then the more constrained you'll be. So, you know, our advice is always to try and structure things in the most flexible way that you can and diversify everything that you can across that whole value stack to capture the full market value. And that, you know, the things like the balancing mechanism is a very hot topic at the moment. There's a lot of kind of early adopters now participating in that from a flexibility perspective. I think it's still quite early in terms of that as a market to really understand how it will perform. But it's, again, you know, there's always new opportunities as we see regulatory changes and reforms coming through that are having an impact on this space. So again, the kind of point I mentioned right at the start was around education. And that's self-educating on the market. It's working with your chosen partners to really understand what the opportunity is and ensuring that you're agile enough to actually capture that when the opportunity presents itself.
Next question, please.
In the
Oh,
back.
sorry.
Steve Evans, Liberty House. Really like to sort of echo what David said. We've invested. We're a steel and aluminium processor. We have flexibility in our process of about 300 megawatts. As David knows, we've been active in demand side response. We're pretty much pulling everything out of that now. We do see significant value in imbalance. We do see significant opportunity in balancing mechanism that's well suited to our processes. Adam, are you going to start informing the market in terms of power responsive being something that is really interested in contracting with batteries and generators? Because I think there's a real risk that you really frustrate a lot of industrial load and point them in the wrong direction, you know, sort of towards stuff that's ultimately painful and not very rewarding.
Yeah. So I think that there's two things there. Firstly, on the power responsive campaign itself, it's been running for 4 years now. You know, it's about time that we had a review and just to see, are we doing the right thing? Are we engaging with the right people? Are there new technologies and new areas that we need to look into? And I think the answer to that is probably yes. There's so much more change going on in terms of charging arrangements, just as one example. So how much does Power Responsive get involved in communicating out the changes to charges which may affect demand-side flexibility? So we're working closely with our colleagues in the Charging Futures area on that. I think in terms of kind of specific market-based questions, I think that what we're doing and a lot of the areas of development are creating these new markets, and there are a lot of new markets. It's not just access to things like BM, but also new products such as TARE, the replacement reserve that's coming in December. You know, these represent new opportunities. The challenge, I think, for the ESO is to make sure that these new opportunities are communicated in the right way and with sufficient lead time. Not just in terms of what the requirements are physically and commercially, but also how much we're going to buy, and you know what the kind of the future and the stability of those markets is going to be. But we need to manage the old markets and the transition to these new markets in a way that avoids these sort of step changes or these shocks. So it's one that we're very mindful of, and you know, through the Power Responsive campaign, we'll be very interested to get feedback on exactly what we should cover. Sorry.
You can do a lot to help the industry understand the difference between where the market is going and what's the latest business plan iteration from the aggregators. Because that's, you know, your observation is an awful lot of the dialogue between industrial load and grid goes by aggregators. And that's not necessarily, you know, sort of a long-term picture. Obviously,
Yeah.
there are aggregators and different aggregators take different, sort of different routes and different views of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the key things is that we need to make sure that the information we provide to the market is clear to people and they don't have to go through aggregators. And so a little plug for the Power Responsive annual report, which is due out in a few weeks. It's going to have more advanced metrics on the markets and the view of DSR on those. So again, more feedback on whether that's the right information, or how would you like it presented in a different way that makes it more transparent without you having to use third parties?
Richard.
I mean, not to ask a question. Richard Eaton, Agri Industries. Given David's point that to really realise the value from flexibility, you've got to look at stacking different products. That means that to us as an end user, the proposals, the propositions that we're getting become increasingly more complicated. And obviously comparing one proposal against another becomes increasingly complicated as well. So there is the ADE Code of Conduct, but is there a need, if there's a future where we can see, demand side flexibility becoming more and more important, is there a need to regulate flexibility providers?
I mean, from my perspective, if we were to be regulated, fact is we'd just become more expensive, and and there's not a huge amount of that to go around right now. So that's the truth of that's how regulation works. We'd need to hire a bunch more people to make sure that we would become a more expensive product. And I think that the market has evolved so much in the last 5 years. I remember when we were first putting together proposals, we were the only people who knew the value of frequency response rate, and now you've got endless consultancies out there that actually can provide help to sort of keep us honest. The market, there is enough people in the market that can stop, people putting out propositions that frankly don't exist. Also, for those people who want to sort of go deep on the FFR results, you can go onto that spreadsheet and see what people are getting in the market. You can see what, more often than not, you can look at wholesale prices, you can look at historic system imbalance prices. It's pretty hard for an aggregator to sort of pull the wool over someone's eyes, and if they are, I just hope that people aren't doing business with these people, because actually the market, I think, is self-correcting itself and coordinating itself in a way that most people are getting much more comfortable with all the different schemes. I would also say that the end result of all of this is just offering a cheaper power contract. That's it. The end result of all of this ability to move power around in an automated way to get it from the cheapest cost at any given time. And I think this is going to happen. I think we're beginning to chat to suppliers around looking at how to just price shapes up differently, just to say, right, actually, if that's your shape and we know how much optionality you have over the year, let's just price it up differently. And that's the thing that I think is going to begin to become quite exciting, because you just take away any of, whether it's FFR, whether it's day ahead, and you leave all the complications to the person who's the pricing analyst to say, how do I price up that optionality? The problem with people like us is we've used digitization to basically lift up the car bonnet, and now you're looking at everything and all its component parts, and it's a bit ugly at the moment because there's just so much data and there's so many markets. It's like we're selling an iPhone in its component parts at the moment. At some point, we're going to bring it back together again, and it's all going to be just a cheaply autonomous, self-correcting sort of market. But it's regulating the aggregators. I'm not sure if that's the problem. I think opening markets up would make it far easier for us to operate.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely hear where you're coming from in terms of being able to go through the different opportunities of, let's say, 3 aggregators knock on your door, and I'm sure it's 10 times that for aggregate industries to say, hey, you have the opportunity to do all this flexibility. Here's what we can do with it, or here's what the next guy can do with it, and here's what the other person can do with it, and you would want some standardized way of looking at it. And I think that maybe it's actually the other way around. It's really worth having that conversation to dive into what you want to get delivered from your flexibility assets themselves, and find that partner that can really deliver it for you. So you're talking about bringing in kind of the larger picture of things, and is flexibility just one part of something that maybe an energy as a service provider can give to you, and then deliver other aspects of it, so it's more of a whole solution as opposed to just the flexibility piece of it. But for every person, it's going to be different, and I think that you're never going to get a standardized, this is what we think of it. And back in the days of the capacity, early years of the capacity market, when everyone was just kind of clamoring for percentage shares of that 45 pounds per kilowatt, those days are long gone. It's a much more sophisticated conversation now.
Thanks, Eric. Stuart,
Yeah, just
that's
a
a supplier's point of view.
final point on that. I think historically, when there was a conversation around flexibility, it used to focus on credibility and track record. And that was, you know, what gave the confidence in the customer's eyes around, you know, somebody's ability to actually deliver. What I think things like the Code of Conduct has helped with over the last period of time is there's more conversations around transparency. I think people are far more open, you know, in terms of practices, value stacking, modelling, information sharing. So there's less risk, I think, than there was, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago in terms of some of the information that's shared. So yeah, I hear a lot of aggregators now using that term, transparency, which is refreshing. So.
I also think, I mean, this might be a bit controversial, I may as well say, I think it would be a failure of the market if we did have to regulate aggregators, because if you look at this in the grand scheme of things, we're digital disruptive technologies that are coming in to, you know, effectively work on the behalf of the consumer to reduce their bill. And I think some of the accused dishonesty, I think, is also actually because the market hasn't actually operated in the way as it could have been. So, you know, because markets aren't perfectly organized at the moment, and because we can't move flexibility around all the different parts at any given time, it quickly means that, you know, value dies and store price goes down. Aggregator missold me something, or FFR price aggregator missold me something. I think sometimes, to be honest, I think we blame the market structures. We blame sort of dishonest proposal, and actually markets not particularly working for us on our behalf right now. And, you know, I think it would be a shame if we weren't able to sort of replicate, you know, same ideas as, you know, how Uber has come in and made it much cheaper, or like how other digital technology platforms or e-mobility services have come in and effectively made way better consumer products. I think regulating at this stage is not necessarily the problem that needs fixing, is my own view. But, you know, I'll take whatever throws thrown